Hey, welcome to my channel. Tools, tips, and tales. Tools to transform, tips to empower, and tales to inspire. I'm Kim Saff, licensed clinical social worker. I have my doctorate in transpersonal psychology, and I've been doing this over 20 years. And this is me helping you transform your life. Yes, that's us doing that. Yes. All right, so in another tape, I talked about the costs of maintaining a behavior. And now we're going to do the flip side, the effort to avoid. Yeah. So it takes effort to avoid doing our work. And if you've been around me for any length of time, you've heard me say, everyone has to do their own work. Yeah, everyone has to do their own work. And by that I mean learning how to come into themselves from a place of acceptance, without judgment, and with compassion. I essentially learn to get right with myself. I make sense of my past experiences. I understand how they showed up in me, how I was impacted by them. I make sense of myself without judgment and with compassion. And when I do that, I start showing up, developing self-trust and self-love. Oh. That's the goal, developing self-love and self-trust. That's what we're doing here, right? But before doing this work, folks avoid it. No, no, no. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at my stuff. I don't want to look in there. I don't want to look at my pit. I want to keep covered with lids. Because when my fear and secure side's driving, my fear and secure side convinces me that the boogeyman lives in there. Yeah, my fear and secure side will have me believing that the boogeyland lives in my pit, and do not look in there because you don't even want to know what lives down there. No. So without even thinking about it, unconsciously, I just keep avoiding. Avoiding. Just looking in at myself. And folks will use this avoidance tactic for decades. Decades upon decades of avoiding doing their work. And the work is just getting right with themselves. I want to make sure you understand that. It's just making sense of ourselves without judgment and with compassion. Developing self-love and self-trust. Goodness. But until then, folks avoid it. And they avoid it via lids. Ways to avoid, check out, deny, escape. So what I want you to do is I just want you to start assessing bird's eye view, witness perspective. Just start assessing the effort it takes to avoid doing your work. And then you can rate it, just like we did with the costs of maintaining. Right? So I'll give you an example. This client I'm thinking of, he uses pot, work, and golf to avoid looking in his pit. Right? Before he started doing this work with me, he was not willing to look anywhere in here. And he used pot to, the function of the behavior was to decrease his anxiety. Work, the function of the behavior was to support his family. But the overkill level, he was obsessed with work. He worked all the time, right? And he was always focused on it. He had an underlying fear that he wasn't good enough. He had this imposter syndrome going on, and he always feared he was going to be fired. So he was compulsively, obsessively focused on work. And then on the weekends, he would golf. He'd be gone for hours, right? And he liked golf as a way to connect with his friends, and he would drink. But really, when we kind of got real with it and got right with ourselves and started really looking at it without judgment, he was able to acknowledge that it was a way to avoid. Yeah, it was a way to avoid his conflicts with his wife at home. He was real defensive. He was pretty angry. He would shame and blame outwardly instead of looking at himself and owning what was his to own, right? So when he kind of assessed the effort to avoid looking at himself and getting right with himself and learning to feel comfortable, he was able to rate pot, work, and golf were really ways that he was putting in a lot of effort to avoid looking at himself. Yeah. Here's the thing. Folks will spend decades avoiding doing the work, and I'm here to tell you, it does not take decades to develop self-love and self-trust. It just doesn't. So we spend a ton more time, effort to avoid doing our work than than it takes to just do the work. And the work's joyful. It feels good to show up to myself without judgment and with compassion. Yeah, I want that. It's goodness. So, tip, do your work. And one of the tools you can use is to really evaluate and assess the effort it takes to avoid it. All right. Enjoy that. See you next time.